My daughter-in-law lifted her glass toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes yet. The bartender slipped me a note, warning she had spiked my wine. My chest tightened, but I stayed calm, the weight of years reminding me that silence can be stronger than shouting. Quietly, I switched our glasses and kept my own record of every detail. That moment was just the beginning of a storm no one at that table could imagine. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Biscayne Bay wind slipped through the open atrium as the ship thrummed under my feet. Formal night shimmered, even though it was only day one. Brass railings glass that caught every chandelier, the polite hush of money on vacation. I set a palm on my clutch and heard Richard's voice the way I do when I need a backbone, not a speech. Paper, not volume. Don't raise your voice, Rose, raise your proof. Richard has been gone 10 years, but good advice keeps a longer lease. I had promised myself on the ride to PortMiami that I would belong without begging. I was a mother on this trip, not an accessory, not a footnote. I stepped into the foyer, ready to act like a woman who knows her own name. The host scanned our QR code while Damon answered a message that lit his face a distracted blue. Aileen glided close, perfume light, smile lighter. The handheld flashed, "Miss R guest, no family privileges." It was one line small as lint, and yet it pricked. Aileen laughed it off all sugar. "Systems are silly," she sang. Damon squeezed my shoulder and said he'd fix it later. Later is a place I've learned not to live in. I'd appreciate a printout, I said, pleasant as a weekday. The host blinked, then nodded. Paper, not volume. 2 papers, 2 realities. The new printout called me guest. The old receipt in my clutch, the one from the Children's Library fundraiser, spelled out Arlise Quinn in a serif that always looked like it stood up straight. I set them side by side inside the clutch, a quiet ledger, how I am recorded versus who I am. I did not argue. I folded both and let the clasp click on the truth like a small, satisfied heartbeat. At the dining room entrance, a place card waited with my name shortened to a role that wasn't mine. Guest. The announcer welcomed Damon Keats and guest while Aileen waved as if she were granting me the honor. A server offered a filled glass to me, then corrected toward Aileen when she tipped her chin. My smile held. I noted the time by the band's first song, the way a nurse might write vitals. 7:12, mislabel. 7:14, reassignment of glass. I did not correct anyone. I kept watching. Damon's phone buzzed like a trapped bee. He skimmed. Slack murmured something about an Asia handoff and kissed Aileen's knuckles. "She'll take care of you, Mom," he said, like care was a neutral word. Aileen slid my chair in, set my napkin framed the evening. "Let me organize your meds so you can relax tomorrow," she offered, voice spun with kindness. "I manage fine," I said. "I have taken pills longer than she has paid taxes." The band eased into a Sinatra number that used to make Richard hum. A woman in a navy blazer approached with practiced warmth. "I'm Crescent Venue Manager. I'm sorry about the label mix-up." "No trouble," I answered. "Could you attach the QR snapshot to our table file for accuracy?" She studied me, then inclined her head. "I'll make sure it's noted. A simple fix, a proper trail." I was not there to be loud. I was there to be exact. Music softened the edges of voices. I let memory walk in for a breath. Richard at our kitchen table, with a broken hinge between his hands. "Name what's wrong," he'd say. Half of repair is saying the truth out loud. I did not say it to anyone but myself. I am Damon's mother, not a guest. I chose inventory over argument, what the host called me, which glass moved, which word Aileen favored. Organize, a small word that can turn a life into a labeled bin. Between salads and the halibut, Aileen leaned toward me with a polished story about a relative who had little memory slips. It helps when someone else keeps track. She said, eyes wide, the kind that invite agreement. Damon nodded, tired and grateful. I pressed water to my lip and let the glass cool the heat in my throat. Her anecdote was a ribbon. The bow was control. I excused myself and walked the long curve of the promenade where the air tasted faintly of salt and new carpet. My keycard opened my cabin without hesitation. I photographed the wristband serial, then emailed the picture to myself with the subject line, "Today, 8:03 p.m." I added 2 lines, access verified, band recorded. No dramatics, no speeches. I stood in the quiet and felt my spine return to me. Back at the table, dessert menus appeared like fans. Aileen sent a message to our group thread, booked a wellness packet for Mom tomorrow so she won't worry about meds. A smiling heart asparkle. I replied with a thumbs up. Then I saved the attachment name into my notes along with the minute the text arrived. The screen dimmed, but the words stayed bright in my head. Guest, not mother. The band struck their last chord before the captain's welcome applause rolling like small surf. Aileen asked the sommelier about tomorrow's pairing dinner and introduced me as our guest from Dallas. I smiled and let the misname drift to the chandeliers. I saved our dining time and table number in the ship app. Names and numbers are anchors. "I'll go if you two want a couple's day," I offered when Damon mentioned the beach excursion. He half smiled, grateful for an out he did not yet know he'd need. At the exit, I asked the host a favor. Could the place card be reprinted with my name by morning? She can come as my mother. Damon added, earnest and late. The host promised to try. I noted the hour. The ship's horn sounded deep and certain. We were leaving the shore, but I was keeping mine. Moon rose thin, silver coin air. If care means control, I needed to know who was keeping score and why. Morning light slid across the cabin carpet. Richard's Maxim steadied me, paper not volume. I clipped on the wristband and promised this voyage would tell the truth, without a single raised voice. On the way to coffee, Aileen caught the strap of my tote with a polite smile. "Let me." Her hand was light, but the movement wasn't. I kept the leather loop in my own palm and thanked her as if she'd held a door. Damon lagged a step behind, already glancing at his phone. I checked my watch, saved the time, and kept walking. At the pool deck cafe, ice clinked and sunscreen hung in the air. Damon scrolled. Aileen smoothed a napkin onto my lap and sang, "Why don't I repack your pill organizer so you can enjoy the ocean today?" I said I'd do it after lunch, lifted the case myself, and slid it back into my tote. I excused myself and took the elevator down to our corridor, where carpet patterns repeated like a test I intended to pass. Inside my stateroom, I set the pill tray under the vanity light and took slow photos of each compartment. One capsule caught the glow differently, a pale ring at the seam, the imprint slightly wrong. Not a verdict, a detail. I created a new album, Voyage Health, and dropped the photos there with date and time. My reflection looked like my mother's the year she labeled freezer containers calm, not scared, organized because fear is useless. On the hour, I'd logged my phone pinged. "Aileen, did you take your meds?" I sent a thumbs up and added a screenshot to the album. Richard again. "Don't argue with the weather. Record the barometer." I poured water, opened the noontime square, and palmed the suspect capsule. It sat cool against my lifeline. I set it on a saucer, photographed it next to today's date, and typed a short entry in my health app, "Decline dose appearance inconsistent." I took the recognized pills and waited for my body to feel exactly like itself. Lunch was quiet. Damon described a funding round in sentences that never fully landed. Aileen filled the spaces with a story about a relative's little slips, the kind that are nothing really until they're not. She touched my wrist the way a television nurse might. Damon squeezed my fingers. His eyes were kind and far away. I chewed, smiled, and filed a phrase for later. It helps when someone else keeps track. Back in my cabin, I set the tote on the bed and looked at it, the way a traveler looks at a suitcase, after airport security. Nothing obviously changed, but you check anyway. I measured zipper positions with my eye. The pill case was now hinge up, not latch up. In a low voice memo, I recorded the time, the positions, the neutral facts. Then I put the tote in the closet and breathed. A group thread chimed. "Aileen, I've emailed Mom the wellness packet, so everything's simple." In my inbox, the subject stood like a stranger at my door. Healthcare proxy, medical info release. not a packing list. I downloaded, did not open, started, and copied the exact file name into my notes. I made tea. I rinsed the suspect capsule and let the water bead off the surface. It didn't smear. I dabbed it dry, slid it into a small zip bag I'd brought for earrings, and wrote today's date on a slip of paper to tuck inside. Then I opened the stateroom safe, set a new code, and laid the bag beside my passport the way you lay a question next to your name. On deck that afternoon, the sky widened like a permission slip. Couples napped under blue towels. Aileen returned with smoothies bright as billboards. "Mango for Mom," she said, setting the fuller one in front of me. "You'll sleep so well tonight." I thanked her and switched cups with her as if for a cleaner coaster. She didn't notice. Damon laughed at something on his phone. I took a polite sip and decided that control often arrives with a smile. I walked a slow loop, feeling the ship's faint muscle. Power lives in small places, a hand on a tote, a label on a screen, a heart emoji like a stamp. None of it proves intention. All of it hints at a story being written for me. Back in my room, I called the pharmacy on my last refill and asked a pharmacist to read the imprint codes for my prescriptions. She did patiently and confirmed what mine should look like. I thanked her, hung up, and compared her description to my photos. Close, but not twins, cousins wearing borrowed jackets. Evening slipped in with warm shipboard gold. I dressed early and opened my planner. I wrote the day like a ledger, tote strap lifted, time stamped. Organizer offered declined. Capsule inconsistent stored. Text logged. File name copied. Smoothie switched. Tidy steadied me. When Damon knocked, I answered with lipstick on and shoes buckled. "Ready, Mom?" he asked. I touched his cheek the way I did when he was 7. "I am," I said. In the hall, Aileen fell into step and mentioned a relax and restore seminar. "Routines slip at our age," she said. "This will help us keep track." In the mirrored elevator wall, 3 versions of us rode down Damon, fading into messages, Aileen bright and composed, and me, a woman with a small album on her phone and a safe humming behind a closed door. Not fragile, awake. At the dining room, I asked for still water with the cap on and watched the server twist it open. Aileen ordered a red to share and touched Damon's sleeve. I let the bottle sit in a neat triangle with my bread plate and the silver salt. Some people fight storms. I prefer charts. I set a simple rule for the night and the rest of the voyage believe what paper says, mine, not theirs. I could be gracious and precise at the same time. I could make space for love and also for facts. Evidence matters. If someone needed me to be forgetful, I had to remember for both of us. If care meant control, the checklist would betray its owner. I sat at the tiny desk by the stateroom window and opened the file Aileen had labeled Wellness Packet. I didn't scroll. I looked underneath. Properties, dates, fonts. The quiet facts that never smiled back. I copied the file name into my notes and turned on view details. The sea outside heaved an animal breathing. Metadata is a kind of confession. The document read, "Prepared by A. Mora, Wellness Ops. Sections stacked in neat order, medication schedule, consent to release healthcare. Proxy optional." Optional was bolded as if a whisper could muscle past a boundary. I captured screenshots of the properties, letting my phone do the memory work my family hinted I was losing. I skimmed the clauses like I was back at the library, red pencil in hand. The proxy language lived in the center where most readers would relax. If left unchecked, decisions defaulted to primary caregiver on file. My name was pre-filled on one line, a blank waited on the other. I slowed down. Each page earned a photo. I saved them into an album titled Not Signed. A knock came with ice. "I brought you tea," Aileen said. Sunny practiced. She set the sweating glass on a coaster I had not asked for. "This just simplifies things, Mom. You won't have to worry." I smiled, not sweet. "I'll read it." She mentioned formal night, then added she could swing by wellness later to answer questions for me. I repeated it in my head like a label, "Answer questions for me." Damon lived by text even when present. "If it helps you relax, maybe it's good," he wrote. I typed back, "I'll review with fresh eyes after lunch. Love you." Then I saved the thread as a PDF. Love isn't blind. It keeps the receipts. Lists calm me. I made 2 columns: legitimate medication list, emergency contacts, allergy notes, not legitimate proxy language bundled under wellness, pre-fill that invites a signature without a decision. I wrote 1 rule on a sticky and tucked it into my clutch. No signatures tonight. Paper first. I walked the promenade to think. The wind lifted my hair and the smell of salt cut through the ship's perfume. I practiced the sentence I would use if pushed. I don't sign medical proxies on vacation. I took a photo of the packet's cover page against the bright line of the horizon and filed it with the others, time-stamped calm. Now. Back in the cabin, I moved the pill organizer into the safe next to the labeled zip bag holding the off-color capsule from yesterday. I texted the group, "I've got my meds covered." Then I muted the thread. Silence is not surrender. It is room to think. Evening edged closer and the ship slipped into its formal shine. Aileen pinged me about pre-dinner cocktails at the foyer bar. "We'll grab a table," she wrote. "You come when you're ready." I answered that I wanted to catch the last of the sunset from the promenade and would meet them after. I set a reminder to photograph any poured drink before touching it. Small habits, big net. Before lunch, I tested the Wi-Fi dead spots along the deck, pacing the shaded side where retirees read paperbacks. I sent the metadata screenshots to my own email subject line, "For Monday, not tonight." I tagged the message with 2 stars a habit from the days when I triaged grant requests between story times. A crew member wiped salt from the rail. I watched his steady rhythm and matched my breath to it. Control isn't loud, it's measured. The sea kept its counsel, but the document did not. In the revision history, I saw earlier timestamps than this trip, a template Aileen had modified on shore. She had clicked through boxes and left the caregiver line blank, which is a kind of choice. I pictured my son half listening, half typing, trusting her fluency, with forms the way he trusts code. I wrote 1 more line in my notebook: "Competence is not benevolence." Then I underlined it twice. I washed my hands the way nurses do and decided to keep them clean tonight. I exported the entire packet to a locked folder named Not Signed and checked the files twice. Then I dressed. Navy gown, the one Richard used to say made me look like I belonged to Twilight. I tucked a slim pen and a pocket notebook into my clutch, the old tools of a woman who ran a children's room and knew how to document broken bindings and late returns. On the way out, I paused at the mirror. Lines at my mouth, a steadiness in my eyes. I was not angry. Anger scatters. I needed order. I slid my keycard behind my phone case, tested the latch on the safe, and listened to the soft click that means plans will wait for you. The corridor hummed with voices, and the lift chimed its polite notes. I let a young couple pass, then followed the signage toward the foyer. Music floated up from the bar like a ribbon. My phone buzzed once Aileen's heart emoji, the digital equivalent of a hand on your elbow. I slipped the phone back, breathing slow, and counted the steps from the carpet seam to the rail. Someday, I thought they would say I remembered nothing. Tonight, I would remember everything. I kept my promise to myself. I would not argue roles in public. I would not sign a proxy in a dress. I would bring facts to a room full of smiles and let the facts do their work. The notebook in my clutch felt as light as paper and as heavy as a door. If the night was going to test my judgment, I wanted the facts to arrive before the smiles did. The foyer bar glowed like warm brass poured over glass. I arrived early, chose a stool with a clean view of the host stand and our table near the dance floor, and set my clutch on the counter. Phone camera open, sound off, Richard's rule steadied my pulse. Breathe once for the room, once for yourself. I would not touch a drink I hadn't photographed. Aileen's text floated on my screen. 2 reds and a spritz for you, Mom. Tidy as a bow. In the mirror behind the bottles, I watched her guide Damon toward the host, her hand at his elbow, her smile dialing the room to her setting. Damon lifted a hand without lifting his eyes from work. I checked the time on my watch and kept my face as calm as polished stone. The bartender noticed the triangle of us and understood it. She set a menu by my elbow. "Evening," she said, voice low and even. Then she placed a folded dessert card and aligned 2 napkins with unusual care corners, squared like a signal. I rested my palm near the card, and with the same motion I would use to tuck a receipt, slid it under my wrist. Inside, in a quick, steady hand, I saw her put something in your drink. Nothing in my body changed. The band tested a sax line. The chandelier scattered sequins of light. I breathed twice, opened my phone to camera, and shifted my clutch so the lens faced the bar. Aileen ordered 2 Cabernets and a spritz light for my mother-in-law. She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at the story she was arranging. The bartender poured left, then right, then the spritz. Simple, visible, ordinary. Aileen lifted one red. "We'll be right back for the spritz," she told the bartender, already turning toward our table. I nodded as if we had an agreement. The bartender's eyes passed over my phone, and then the rim of the glass in Aileen's hand, adrift, not a stare. At the table, the host laid napkins like folded sails. From my stool, I could see our 3 settings, and in front of mine, that pale tent card with its tidy verdict, guest. I walked to the table, lifted my phone for a casual shot, both reds, same height, the chandelier's gold reflected on both bowls, and sat. I dragged my chair an inch, recentered my shawl, and while the room looked elsewhere, rotated the stemware. Her place to me, mine to her. I nudged the coasters until they matched. They returned on a tide of music. "To family," Aileen said brightly, raising my red. Damon smiled, still half in a call. I lifted the spritz, touched it to my lips, and nothing more. Aileen took a generous swallow from the red in front of her, the one that had been mine. The bartender polished a glass at the corner and let her gaze rest on Aileen's wine for half a beat, then on me. I gave the smallest nod and folded the dessert card under my small notebook in the clutch. Paper rests easily when it tells the truth. "Mom, you good?" Damon asked. "Perfect," I said and meant it. I took a photo of the table as it now was, glasses, napkins, coasters time-stamped, then slid the phone back. Under the table, my thumb pressed the watch's side button. The timer began. Music lifted. Couples drifted under the chandelier. Aileen tugged Damon to the floor. They returned a few minutes later, and she took another drink, laughing about how the lights made everyone prettier. "Could be the wattage," she said, fanning herself with the menu. Damon teased her, and she took a bigger swallow, like someone catching up. 7 minutes. Her smile grew glossy at the edges. She blinked twice, missed a beat in the conversation, straightened the already straight salt shaker, and smoothed the cloth as if it had spoken. "Maybe water," she said, cheerful, but not quite attached to the words. "That happens," I said. "Let's ask." The bartender was there with a chilled glass before I could lift a hand. Aileen focused on the condensation as if it were a puzzle. She laughed bright with a hollow after ring and drank gratefully. 12 minutes. Damon's phone hummed. He murmured an apology and stepped away to take the call he never can ignore. Aileen watched the chandelier like it was explaining something slow and complicated. "So many lights," she whispered, and then louder to me, "It feels warm, doesn't it?" "Perhaps the crowd," I said. I folded my napkin, unfolded it, and counted my own breaths instead of hers. 16 minutes. She touched her temple and blinked as if dust had found her eyes. "I'll freshen up," she said, the way people say they'll adjust a painting that hangs slightly off. She stood, again smiling too hard at no one, then took a smaller, aimless sip, as if to argue with the first 2. Damon slid back in, pocketing his phone. "Everything okay? Just warm," she said, the consonant sticking. Maybe I should slow down. Her gaze drifted to the dance floor and then back as if it had gone by elevator. The bartender paused within sight, not hovering, not gone. I took one more photograph the table, her glass now short a finger of red, the water glass sweating beside it, and saved it to the same album that holds quiet facts. I felt the timer tap my wrist. 20 minutes. Across the bar, the band slipped into a ballad. The crystal hummed back. A server passed with a tray of soup, steam ghosting his lenses, and for a second, I saw our table, as he would. 3 guests, 1 story, and only one of us keeping the record. If the truth was in the glass, Time would pour it out for everyone to see. 20 minutes after the toast, my watch kept time while the chandelier scattered it. Aileen and Damon moved across the floor. Her steps landed clean, then a half-beat late, then later still. Damon laughed and spun her. I kept counting and let my breath stay slow. The first tells were small. Her eyes turned glassy like windows before a storm. She misnamed the song by a decade, then clutched Damon's sleeve to finish a turn that didn't need help. I wrote the minute, the song, and one phrase so many lights into my notebook. Paper doesn't argue. It waits. Back at the table, their smiles looked poured on. Aileen fanned herself with the menu. "It's sparkly in here," she said, as if the air were champagne. Damon reached for the carafe. Her hand drifted toward the red she'd already sipped. I nudged the spritz to my side. My glass stayed cold and dull. She pushed her chair to stand. The scrape was sharp as a fork on porcelain. She wobbled, caught the chair back, and laughed a bright laugh that broke. Heads turned. I kept my voice kind and shaped like a rule. "Sit," I said, and lifted a hand toward the host stand. Cressid arrived with the calm of a man who fixes things in public. "How can we help?" "Please hold our table exactly as it is," I said. "No clearing glassware. We may need your incident log for tonight." "Of course." He set himself between us and the nearest busser, a courteous wall. Mom Damon whispered, "Maybe she's just dehydrated." "Let the staff assist," I said gently. "Keep the table intact." I didn't wave my notebook, but I left it where the ink shone. My phone lay beside it, camera roll already stacked with timestamps. Damon hesitated, then nodded, remembering, "I've built lives from order." At the bar, Shannon didn't hover, but her orbit widened to give us space. Her glance touched the stemware, flicked to Cressid, and moved on. The gap she created felt like a quiet curtain. Aileen's sentences began to fray. "The diamonds are dancing," she murmured, looking up. Secrets she added, as if the chandelier were whispering. Damon's spine straightened. I copied the words exactly one clean line apiece. "I'll just restroom," she said, and rose again. Her knee nudged the table. Water rocked and settled. Cressid raised 2 fingers. A crew member with a discreet first aid pin took position near the dance floor, waiting without crowding. I photographed the setting from my chair, 2 angles, careful not to touch anything. Linen coasters, rings of condensation, the measured descent of the red. If security needs to review cameras, I told Cressid we'll cooperate fully. "Understood," he said already. Moving along the lane that leads to procedure. Aileen tried to step and couldn't. The floor seemed to tilt. She gripped the chair fingers, whitening, then sat too hard, breath leaving on a thin sound. Damon reached for her, and for his phone, in the same heartbeat, twin reflexes colliding. "Aileen, I'm fine," she said brightly. But the brightness had nowhere to live. Sweat beaded along her hairline. The room held its breath. "Water," I suggested. Shannon arrived with a fresh glass beads, cold as rain. Aileen lifted it, missed by a fraction, corrected, and drank. She put it down with theatrical care, as if passing a test. "Let's get a medic," Damon said, panic showing. "Yes," I said, "and please notify security as well." I addressed the second sentence to Cressid. "Not my son." Damon met my eyes and saw the steadiness he grew up with. Permission slips, deadlines, notes, and margins. Cressid angled away to speak into a handheld without drawing the room. The band softened by half a notch. Conversation loosened. Aileen sagged against the chair, back focus, drifting like a weak signal. "It's just warm," she said, the consonant slipping. I wrote warm down too. Mom Damon asked what's going on. "We're following procedure. That protects everyone." He swallowed his argument and steadied Aileen's shoulders instead. The first aid officer arrived, kneeling so he wouldn't tower. "Ma'am, may I ask a few questions?" She tried to answer and produced a story about dancing in the wrong order. He checked pulse, asked about allergies, asked what she'd had to drink. 2 sips, I said, lifting the spritz, and a glass of red at the table, Damon added, then blinked at his own words. "Security is on the way," Cressid said quietly. "We'll keep the table untouched." "Thank you," I said. "When they arrive, the glasses will matter." Aileen's hand drifted toward the red again. I lifted mine without touching her, a small stop sign made of mercy. "Let's wait," I said. She nodded like a child who means to obey and forgets. The chandelier, untroubled, kept catching light and handing it back. Somewhere a cork popped. Somewhere a birthday song started and ended. At our table, time stretched into something useful. Damon's face reassembled worry, memory, pride. He made the call to the medic without leaving his chair. I nodded. I looked at the red. It looked back the way a mirror does when you already know what you'll see. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the exactness of a book correctly shelved. Footsteps clipped and quick announced security clipboards, gloves, the kind of calm that comes with forms already printed for nights like this. If the truth had hands tonight, they were gloved and carried clipboards. I kept my hands still, my records ready. The security office felt like a refrigerator with a heartbeat cold air and a low hum stitched through banks of monitors. Coffee steamed somewhere out of frame. I stepped inside and chose my words like tools pulled from a tray. "Please retain the foyer bar and dining room video," I said, "and protect our table glassware." The officer in charge nodded once. His nameplate read Avery Locke. Gloves snapped as he opened a labeled evidence kit. He brought up the first camera-wide shot of the foyer bar, the brass rail gleaming like a rule. On a second screen, the dining room view waited. "Let's sync clocks," Avery said. I set my phone on the desk and opened the photos, my pre-toast shot of the two reds, the table after the toast, the chandelier's song cue caught in the background. Shannon stood a respectful step behind us, ready with pour times. We matched seconds to seconds until the timeline clicked into place. Avery rolled the foyer feed back one song length. Frame by frame, the bar came alive as a slideshow of intentions. There was Aileen at the edge of the counter, back 3/4 to the camera smile aimed toward the room. Her clutch sat half-zipped. Her fingers dipped, pinching something small. She pivoted, shoulder-screening her hand. A tiny tilt over one red wine glass, just a heartbeat, and the shadow of a stir with a straw. Her eyes scanned the room as if counting stars. "Freeze," Avery said. The frame froze on her hand, a pale oval against crystal. We let the footage run. Aileen lifted the glass in question a fraction, placed it at the set where my place card stood earlier, then smoothed the coaster as if tidying. On the dining room feed, later that same glass sat at my seat. I held up my pre-toast photo. The shapes matched coaster nicks, water ring the position of a crumb. "Continuity established," Avery said, and wrote the words on his form in clean block letters. Shannon gave her statement the way a professional reads a recipe, measured exact without flavor added. Observed guest introduce unknown substance to red wine. Slipped a note to the other guest for safety. No adjectives, only sequence. Crescent arrived with the incident log already titled with our table number, and the time medical was called. He added "do not clear glassware" and signed. Copies slid into a manila folder that grew a case number the way a plant grows a tag. Damon stared at the printed still. He opened his mouth, then shut it as if words required a permit he hadn't been issued. "What do you need me to do, Mom?" He asked quietly, the question that moved him from husband to son. "Let the system work," I said. "Stand where you're asked. Tell the truth you saw." Avery lined up 3 bags each with a white strip for location and time. He sealed the red from Aileen's place, the red that had been at mine, and my untouched spritz. He had us initial each seal. The sound of adhesive smoothing down felt like a lock sliding home. He radioed the ship's medical officer to document Aileen's condition, then typed a note about potential toxicology. I wrote the case number in my notebook and messaged it to myself to the same folder that held the capsule photo and the not-signed folder. "We'll need consent to search her cabin," Avery said, "unless circumstances escalate. Given the video, we'll request it with you present. Mr. Keats, as spouse, you may accompany. Ms. Quinn, you may attend as a witness if invited by family." "Invite her," Damon said. He rubbed his eyes once. "Please." "Understood," Avery said. "We'll proceed by the book." We walked the long way back to the dining room so the room could breathe without us. The band had changed tempo. Our table sat exactly as we left it, the chairs squared to the linen glasses absent, now the space marked by Avery's clipboard and a small tent card that read, "Hold." I photographed the sealed bags in Avery's hands near the metal placard with our table number. "For visual continuity," I said. He nodded and had crested witness with a signature. Aileen, attended by the medic, had been moved to a quiet area near a service door, a screen partially shielding her from sight. I didn't hover. Damon went to her with the gentleness I taught him and the silence I learned from my late husband. The medic checked pupils, and Pulse wrote numbers with a pen clipped to his sleeve and asked about what had been consumed. Shannon's written sequence saved everything from argument. Avery returned from a brief call with a consent form on a clipboard. Damon read, squared his shoulders, and signed. He handed the pen back without theatrics. Avery radioed, "Proceed to guest cabin. Evidence team to rendezvous outside elevators." I touched Damon's sleeve once, the way you test a doorknob before you trust the darkness beyond it. "Paper will speak," I said. He nodded, jaw set, not with fury, but with decision. In the corridor, the night air felt cleaner, as if truth had opened a window a few inches. Elevator doors whispered open. We stepped inside our reflections, riding upward with us in the mirrored walls 3 figures, and all of us holding something. Avery with his sealed bags, Damon with a folded resolve, and me with a small notebook that had outlived more storms than this one. Truth moves slowly, but it moves. Rumor sprints and sleeps. Always. If guilt lived anywhere besides a glass, it would be hiding in a suitcase. We went to look. Avery briefed us at the door, voluntary recorded limited in scope. Damon said yes before Aileen could shape the word. I stood to the side, hands clasped, watching gloves and tags, small details that do not lie. The vent air tasted metallic. I kept my pen ready and my voice unused. He photographed the room, bed, desk, closet, 2 suitcases. The zipper on her carry-on pointed to 11 o'clock, the pull tab resting on a scuff I noted in my head. "Begin," Avery said, and the zipper's travel sounded louder than the air system. I logged the time and the bag color and let the camera do the talking. The first pouch held 3 glass vials nested in a velvet roll. No labels, only faint adhesive ghosts, and a fine ring where powder had leveled. Avery held his breath as he slid each into a numbered sleeve, then sealed the pouch with a click. He called the medical officer on his radio. The reply came back crisp as paper standing by. Aileen tried for Airy. "They're vitamins. Everyone carries extras." Damon stared at the velvet roll as if it had spoken. I wrote a single word, vials. I did not ask which vitamins arrive without names. Next came a prescription bottle that looked precisely like mine, down to the pharmacy logo, and my name, but the shape of the capsules inside was off, different 2-tone wrong imprint. Avery photographed the label and the mismatched contents together. The medical officer arrived, examined 1 capsule under a pocket light, and said suspected substitution. I nodded once and wrote mimic. A tablet sat charging on the desk. With Aileen's permission, Avery unlocked it and mirrored the screen to an evidence drive. Rows of thumbnails showed me in kitchens and doorways, blinking as if a word had slipped. Dates aligned with days Aileen had helpfully repacked my tote. I looked only long enough to see the pattern prompt record narrate. I wrote curated confusion. In her purse organizer lay a folded page titled Wellness Talking Points. Phrases marched down the sheet, fragility set, routine stress at her age I can keep track. It even reminded her to speak gently about healthcare paperwork to have a notary nearby. I let the page rest under Avery's lens and set my own jaw instead. Aileen tried again, wobbling on dignity. I was protecting the family from a crisis. She forgets. I step in. I answered once like closing a ledger. If it were protection, you would have asked my consent. Damon flinched at the word asked. He looked from the bottle to the vials to the tablet, then to me, and the question in his face was a boy's what now? Now was simple. Chain of custody. Avery numbered every bag, read each ID aloud, had Damon initial as witness. I declined to touch anything. The medical officer scheduled toxicology for the seized items and promised a preliminary within hours. I requested copies of the log and the case number. My level voice steadied Damon more than any hand on his shoulder. We stepped into the corridor to breathe non-recirculated air. Aileen sat on the edge of the bed, eyes bright with the kind of tears meant to be heard through a door. Damon whispered, "What happens after the tests?" I answered him with the only plan worth having. We let paper speak. And tomorrow, when words like proxy or release appear again, you'll decide what you sign and what you refuse. He nodded, the motion of a man learning a slower language. The elevator bell chimed somewhere beyond the bend. Avery joined us with a summary: vials, recovered suspected substitution. Digital files, mirrored talking points seized. He handed Damon a copy and offered me one. I slid it into my clutch beside the folded note from the bar and the photo of two identical reds that were not, in fact, the same. "Security will hold the room. We're sealing items and transferring them to the safe," Avery said. "If additional consent is needed, we'll ask." He looked at me then, not past me. I kept my temper out of my eyes. Rage is real. It does not help a form read cleanly. We walked back toward the elevator bank. The carpet scrollwork bowed under our silence. Damon cleared his throat and failed to speak. I spared him the attempt. "You don't have to defend anyone tonight," I said. "You only have to observe." He nodded again, smaller, and I knew he had heard me, even if he could not yet say so in words. At the landing, ship's hum and cold air braided. Avery keyed his radio, proceeding to hold. "Evidence team en route." The door to the stateroom closed behind him with a seal sound that felt like relief. Inside, Aileen's crying turned theatrical, then quieted as footsteps approached. Professionalism dims performances. I touched Damon's sleeve once, not to comfort, only to anchor us to the moment's facts. "Tomorrow we'll ask for a signature," I said, "and signatures are where men choose their mothers." He took a long breath and let it out, as if setting down a box he had carried too far. We moved as the ship moved, steady, deliberate. The air tasted like coffee from the security office and like salt from the sea beyond the steel. I thought of Richard and the line that saves more women than advice paper, not volume. I had kept it. Tonight, it kept me. I wanted Damon to see that calm is not distance. It is a choice to honor facts, so feelings do not drive us into more harm tonight yet. Morning would ask Damon for a signature, and signatures are where men choose their mothers. Security pinged both cabins just after 9. Guest services had a notary on duty for paperwork questions. I dressed in slate blue and carried my folder labeled, "Not signed." Damon texted that he was on his way. Aileen sent a heart emoji to the group thread, and a beat later, "So we can relax today." I muted the thread and walked. The conference nook by the service desk smelled of toner and citrus cleaner. A small placard read "Notary Services" with a pen laid crosswise like a bridge. Avery stood aside, neutral and alert. The notary, a woman with reading glasses on a chain, explained the rules before anyone sat voluntary. No coercion, clear intent capacity. Checked copies provided. I placed the packet on the table, face up, and set my phone flat with the recorder icon glowing where all could see. Aileen opened with honey. "This just makes things easier for all of us." I kept my tone even. Medical proxies aren't vacation paperwork. The notary asked me for my state ID, asked 3 simple questions about date, ship, and itinerary, then nodded to record that I had capacity. I rested my hands on the folder and breathed through my nose until the heat left my face. The notary separated pages with the crisp care of someone used to bad mornings. One page named a primary caregiver decision-maker and placed Aileen's printed name in the blank. A parallel page allowed a decline and revocation acknowledgement. The pen sat uncapped between Damon's right hand and those lines bright as a traffic flare. The room went as quiet as a chapel and as unforgiving as a docket. I gave my only statement. "You don't have to choose a side to love me," I said to my son, "but signatures choose consequences." Then I turned my palm up, empty open, and let silence do the work. Aileen's lip trembled on cue. Avery looked at the table edge, not the tears. Damon read both lines twice. His mouth flattened, then softened. He glanced at me and I hope saw not a demand, but a steady place to stand. He signed the decline and revocation acknowledgement. The notary stamped, dated, and initialed with a clean rhythm that sounded like shoes on tile. Copies slid into folders, one to Damon, one to the case file, one to me. Avery photographed the signature page beside the case number and thanked the notary for the record. Aileen pivoted to performance. I was only trying to help. She whispered, turning her face to the softest light. I let the line pass me like a wave that would not touch shore. Avery logged the declination into security's file with a note to inform the medical unit do not honor proxy assertions by third parties. Damon and I took the long route to the promenade. We sat with the wind in our jackets and watched the sea write and erase its sentences. I wanted to believe she was good, he said. Belief belongs to churches, I answered, and signatures belong to courtrooms. He nodded and rested his elbows on his knees, like the boy who used to tie his laces twice before a game. Back on his balcony, he told Aileen he needed space. No more organizing my mother, he said. No more wellness, anything. He stayed in the guest room. She kept the bedroom and the thin dignity that locks a door from the inside at 10 in the morning. I did not enter. I texted him 3 words, let paper speak. He answered with a single period, the kind that means I heard you. Avery's message arrived near noon. Preliminary toxicology showed a sedative admixture consistent with a short-acting benzodiazepine. The vials and the wine glass would continue to lab when we docked. Port authorities notified for arrival in Miami, he added. I archived the message and photographed the horizon in case I ever needed to remember the exact shade of the water when the day turned from private problem to public record. The ship kept its pleasant announcements, art auctions, trivia, a salsa class on deck 12. We ate soup in the cafe like polite strangers. Damon checked the door code twice and moved my name from guest to mom on our text thread without comment. Small restorations count. I walked the outer deck alone until I could breathe without counting. The sun cut a clean path across the water. If the ocean had kept our secrets last night, the shore would ask for names. I was ready to speak mine and to let the papers speak for everyone else. On the way down from guest services, we passed the photo gallery. Our faces from embarkation smiled from a glossy strip where a clerk had written, "Family," in silver ink. I bought the strip a reminder that ink is only opinion until a stamp meets paper. Aileen walked 3 paces ahead, phone to ear. She said the word misunderstanding twice and wellness 3 times. Damon stared at the carpet pattern. We stopped at a window where the glass bowed the horizon into a slow parenthesis. Mom, he said, if she apologizes, I shook my head once. Apologies are sentences. Change is an action verb. When he opened his eyes, he was older than he had been at breakfast. In the afternoon, I sat with my notebook and wrote simple lines in librarian script, notary present, no coercion, ID checked, decline signed, copy filed. If anyone ever argued the day from memory, I wanted my memory to be legible. Richard taught me that after the flood, when neighbors tried to define help as whatever left them dry, he brought receipts, not speeches, and people stopped arguing. The wake curled like handwriting in chalk. I waited. Security pinged us at dawn report ready. Miami was a graphite line ahead of the bow, soft as pencil dust. I slid my not-signed folder into my tote, checked that the photos and timestamp logs were backed up, and met Damon outside the medical office. He buttoned his jacket like a man arriving for weather he could not name. We went in without speeches. The medical officer greeted us with the rested voice of someone who trusts numbers. Avery stood at the counter clipboard, poised coffee cooling beside the printer. The officer laid 2 pages down and spoke in clean nouns. Sedative admixture present. Anticholinergic agent detected concentrations consistent with cognitive impairment rather than therapy. No moral adjectives, only the sentence math uses when it has nothing to prove. My throat tightened and then unlocked. 2 certified copies, please." Avery nodded and pressed print. Embossed seals bloomed blue along the margin. We compared the pill photographs from my phone to the seized bottle from the cabin. The officer read imprints aloud. The mismatches sounded like a child mispronouncing a line he was never taught. Chain of custody updated. Signatures, initials, time. I wrote mismatch confirmed on my pad and underlined it once. Damon stared at the counter and said very quietly, "I should have seen it." I touched the corner of the paper. "You were loving. That is not an error the law punishes. Now we finish." He nodded and set his hands flat on the counter like a man learning a new posture. Aileen tried for narrative, while the printer pushed out the embossed seals. They were supplements, that's all. The officer did not turn. "Controlled substances identified," he said flat. Avery asked her to wait in interview 2. She went with a flurry of offended innocence, the kind that evaporates in front of a clock. I kept my voice in my pocket and let the document speak the language she had hoped to borrow. A radio crackled. "Port contact confirmed," Avery said. "Packet transmitted video stills, lab report, witness statements, chain of custody log." He read the case number back to me and I wrote it on the margin of my copy in small librarian script. I wanted the future to find me consistent. We thanked the officer. I slid the certified reports into plastic sleeves and filed them behind my photos where the paper would not bruise. We walked the outer deck while the ship traced its last wide curve toward the channel. Tugboats nosed us like careful dogs. The wind tasted of diesel and salt and a faint sweetness from the pastry station that hadn't opened yet. I took a photograph of the skyline and saved it without filters, a record of the hour the rumor finally left the room. Damon leaned on the rail. What do I say to her? I watched the water change from slate to old coin. "Nothing you would regret reading back," I said. He nodded, and the hurt in his face turned into work. Back in security, a woman in plain clothes waited with a spiral notebook and a gaze that measured corners. "Detective Marisol Vega, PortMiami," she said, showing ID. Her tone was brisk without cruelty. "Scope is felony battery via adulteration with a possible elder abuse enhancement, depending on elements. Will preserve Miranda collects statements, secure physical evidence for transfer, and coordinate with the state attorney." She asked me 3 clean questions: times, locations, whether I had consumed the wine. I answered with timestamps and pointed to exhibits instead of adjectives. Damon offered his phone for message exports without being asked. Detective Vega accepted it with a paper glove over courtesy, then handed him a receipt. "You'll get this back once the download completes," she said. He looked relieved to have something useful to do. Usefulness this morning pointed forward instead of backward. It is a mercy when a task replaces a guilt that cannot fix yesterday. Aileen asked for an informal family talk before any of it. "Just us," she said at the threshold, eyes wide with that talent of hers. "You know my heart. All statements should be recorded." I answered and stepped back. Avery noted the refusal non-hostile mother, present boundary clear, and moved her where the camera could see. Damon kept his counsel. The silence between us finally belonged to us. We waited while manifest checks and dockside choreography aligned like teeth in a well-kept zipper. The ship spoke in horns. Crew radios replied in clipped yeses that sounded like stitches. The channel narrowed to cranes and cranes to streetlights. A forklift blinked somewhere below patient as a metronome. I placed my pen in my clutch the way I had every morning at the library, a small ritual that says, "I am ready to sign only what is true." Damon exhaled and squared his shoulders. Somewhere below, lines were being thrown and checked. Detective Vega closed her notebook. "We board at all stops," she said. "Please remain available." We nodded. The hall smelled faintly of cold air and copier heat. I thought of Richard's old sentence paper, not volume, and felt a steadiness I had earned one receipt at a time. I touched the folder in my bag and felt the gentle weight of the copies and the photographs, the small, decent gravity of proof. The ocean had carried us to the door. Now the land would ask for signatures and answers. Detective Vega came up the gangway ahead of us, the bay wind pushing against her jacket like a firm hand. Two port officers followed expressionless and awake, in the way people are when a long morning is already decided. Avery waited at the foyer with a rolling case. He lifted the seals for her inspection. I kept my folder close and the bartender's note inside an envelope I had initialed at the seam. Damon stood beside me, palms open, face set. We were shown to the ship's interview room, a space built for neutral voices, pale walls, a fixed camera, a table that left no shadows. Vega laid out the pieces one by one, saying the labels aloud as if reading to a jury that hadn't arrived yet. Still images, incident log, toxicology, copies sealed stemware, my photographs the original note. Avery recited chain of custody. I added the time I received each copy, and he countersigned. I did not look at Aileen. I looked at dates. Vega began with clarity. Ms. Quinn described the moment you switched the glasses. I answered with the timestamp from my photo and the song title that was playing. When did you first suspect the wine I referenced the folded card slipped by the bartender and the earlier anomalies with my medication? Did you drink the red at any point? No. My voice sounded like a clerk reading call numbers. Damon confirmed the dance floor interval. The camera light did not blink. They brought Aileen in then. A port officer read her rights. She said she didn't understand and asked for Damon. He stepped back, fingers on the chair behind him. I folded my hands in front of me and kept them there. Vega asked a few routine questions. Aileen said she had freshened my wine with a supplement, then misnamed what the vial would have contained. Vega ended the interview at Aileen's request for counsel. A line was drawn across the page, neat as a ruler's edge. The cuffs came out quietly, metal against fabric. Vega cited probable cause video imagery, toxicology findings, eyewitness note. You are detained pending transport to the terminal, she said. Aileen looked for Damon's eyes. He did not give them. I kept mine on the clipboard where Vega's handwriting made what happened legible. Aileen's wrists met the chrome and the room exhaled. We moved back through the foyer toward the gangway. The ship's medical officer met us halfway and handed over certified copies of the report. Avery released the sealed glassware to port custody. Each bag's number was read aloud and checked against the log. I kept my stamped copy in the front of my folder where it pressed against the envelope with the note. The paper felt heavier than the metal. The terminal security suite smelled like toner and cold air. A property clerk scanned each exhibit and shelved them in numbered bins. Vega put Shannon on speakerphone to confirm the origin of the note. The bartender's voice was steady. She described the folded card, the alignment of napkins, the moment she saw a hand hover over a glass that was not hers. Thank you, Vega said. You may return to duty. The record kept her calm in the room long after the line went dead. Aileen sat across from us with a tissue, crying carefully, the way some people do when they know cameras are in ceilings. Vega asked if she wanted to make a new statement. Aileen asked again for Damon. He said, I'll wait here. The officer logged that answer. My breath stayed even. I imagined the library's old stamp pad, the rhythm of date after date, pressed into the backs of novels the way the ink told patrons when to return what they borrowed. A chime sounded on Vega's phone. She read, then looked up. Preliminary records check shows prior incidents associated with a former legal name. She did not pronounce it. We will verify before we discuss details. I nodded. Paper first names later. Damon's shoulders dropped, the surrender of someone who finally realizes weight has sources, not just effects. Vega released us from the suite with a card for victim services and her direct number. Outside the glass, Miami heat rose off the concrete in ripples. The breeze carrying ship air gave way to the smell of buses and sunblock and fresh oranges from a cart by the curb. I set my folder on a bench and pressed my palm on it as if to iron the morning flat. Avery thanked us and returned aboard to finish his log. Damon and I stood together a long minute without speaking. What do we do now? He said. We let the process finish, I answered. We keep our copies. We rest when we can. A shuttle door slid open and closed. Somewhere behind the glass wall, a printer worked through a stack, insisting on a future in order. I adjusted the strap of my purse and felt the envelope edges bite gently against my wrist. Vega stepped out with a final instruction. "We'll call before sunrise. Be reachable." She held my eyes a moment, a small recognition between two women who rely on written things. I said I will. She nodded and went back through the badge-only door. Miami shimmered in heat, not mystery. The ocean had carried us to the threshold. The city would ask for names and signatures. If last night proved what a glass could hold, tomorrow would prove what stories could not. I lifted my folder and stood up straighter. Damon matched me the way he did when he was small and wanted to show he was ready. We walked toward the curb, not away. The heat felt honest. Vega called at 8:10 a.m., her voice clear as the morning light on the bay. Database hits confirmed, she said. 2 prior wellness incidents tied to your daughter-in-law's former alias. "Can you come in with your folder?" I said yes. Damon heard the end of the call from the kitchen and nodded once. The unit's conference room was built for daylight and decisions. Vega had a grid taped to the wall, not the corkboard with red string you see in movies, just columns and boxes, alias city document method money. She slid our CCTV still into place, then the toxicology report. I placed Shannon's folded note in a plastic sleeve at the center and initialed the label. Damon watched the order build as if seeing a map he had walked without knowing. The Tampa file came first, a short obituary, a hospice referral, and a bank form that read like a shadow of compassion, routine check-ins, capacity conversations, organizing assistance. The emails carried the same words Aileen had used with me in the same calm tone, the syllables of kindness arranged like padlocks. Vega pointed to dates. Within 30 days of symptom onset durable power of attorney drafted, she said. Damon's jaw tightened. Mine did not move. A second stack covered the uncle. A facility director had ordered a chart review after something felt wrong. Anticholinergic burden noted. Deprescribing improvement and exit to a safer place. Vega summarized the call notes and the medication class that matched my lab. There was no drama in her voice, and that mattered. Facts deserved the dignity of plain speech. An assistant state attorney joined for 10 minutes, sleeves rolled, pen tapping quietly. He traced the money and public filings wires to a new joint account, a beneficiary change, a canceled appointment that cleared the way for a signature. "Pattern shows intent," he said. Damon whispered. "Was I next?" I answered. "You were the house and the future." Vega nodded once. Motive blends money with control. We'll keep it about paper. We dialed the first prior victim on speaker, Mr. Hughes's daughter. Her voice had the flat steadiness of someone who has told this story too many times. She made routines sound like care, she said. Pill organizers' calendar edits that moved appointments I never approved. Daddy started missing the ones that mattered. I asked permission to share our case number with her attorney. "Please do," she said. Then a silence that felt like a church aisle. Next was the facility director. He was concise, a man who trusts records more than adjectives. He walked Vega through the pharmacy reconciliation that flagged the sedating load and the symptom relief that followed. He emailed an attestation within minutes. I logged the subject line and time in my notebook, an old habit that kept the room level even as my heart climbed the stairs. By midday, the grid on the wall was fuller than the hour. Vega outlined the charging path the ASA would consider once the state lab finalized the report: attempted poisoning, elder abuse fraud, possibly witness tampering if the talking points sheet tied to coercion. "Protection order?" I asked. "I have the forms," Vega said. She printed them while we waited. I initialed where a clerk would need proof I had read each clause. Damon asked to be included. He signed with a hand that shook, once then steadied. We stepped out for a quick lunch in the lobby where daylight spilled across tile like a fresh page. Damon put his head in his hands for one breath, then lifted it. I wanted her to be who she said he told me. "Belief belongs to churches," I said gently. "Signatures belong to courtrooms." He managed a small smile that did not reach his eyes. We finished half a sandwich and left the rest. Appetite has its own logic on days like this. In the afternoon, Vega asked if I wanted to look through the hospital lab window while the courier brought slides to the state facility. "You don't have to," she said. I decided to go. We waited on a hallway bench and watched a tech move with the calm economy of calibration. I did not need to see a microscope to believe a number. I only needed to know the number was leaving with a signature and a seal. Back at the unit, we placed 2 fresh tabs in my folder, others and beneath it, orders. The protective order paperwork came off the printer warm. Vega reviewed each condition in plain language. No contact, direct or indirect. No management of my medical information. No access to my residence or the library where I volunteer. Damon added his addresses. I signed both copies and watched the notary stamp hit the page. The sound was small and decisive. Dusk found us on my condo balcony where the sky turned the color of a quiet bruise. I filed the day's copies in order: grid statements, emails, attestation draft charges, protective order. The folder closed with the polite click of a thing that knows its job. Damon brought 2 glasses of iced tea and set them down carefully as if the table were a witness. "Do you want me to stay tonight?" he asked. "Yes," I said. We did not talk about forgiveness. We talked about locks. Together, my phone buzzed once more. Vega lab rush complete. ASA authorizing expanded warrant in the morning. I read the line twice and felt the room unclench by a degree. Pattern had finally become paperwork, and in the morning, paperwork would become handcuffs and distance. Vega met me outside the courtroom with a thin stack and a quiet smile. "Signed," she said, tapping the top page. The judge's stamp was clean as morning light. I ran a finger along the raised seal and felt something loosen the way a tight jar lid finally gives. The hallway carried the hush of a library at opening a place where answers exist if you look them up. Inside arraignment, we sat 2 rows back. I kept my folder on my lap thumb on the tab that read orders. The magistrate read the counts. The state filed attempted poisoning, elder abuse, fraud-related offenses. Each word landed without drama, as if the room had agreed to speak only in verbs that could be proven. Damon kept his shoulders square. I kept my breathing even. The moment that mattered came with conditions. The judge issued a criminal no-contact order: no calls, no texts, no sideways messages through friends. Surrender passport, restricted movement, no handling of anyone's medications, compliance monitoring. I wrote the docket number in my planner, then the time. A clerk passed copies down the row. Paper slid into my palm like a key finding its lock. Bail was argued and bounded. The assistant state attorney outlined pattern and risk. The defense asked for reason. The bench set a high bond with GPS treatment intake and a warning I believed any tampering with witnesses ends the daylight. Somewhere behind us, a pen scratched. I let one slow breath go and did not chase it with another. As deputies guided Aileen out, her eyes searched for Damon's. He didn't rise. I kept my gaze on the seal above the bench. There was nothing I could add that would make the truth truer. Paper speaks, we don't. In the corridor, the ASA walked us through the next pages of this book. We hadn't chosen lab certifications. Discovery Exchange a window for victim impact statements that I could write when I was ready. Vega's summary was simple. Document everything she said. We're good on proof. I penciled dates into my planner, then boxed them with a steady rectangle the way Richard used to. I asked for one errand before home. We met Shannon at a small cafe that watched the inlet. She came in at the end of a shore leave hair, tucked back hands as sure as they'd been behind the bar. I thanked her for the note that started the turn and handed her a card with a message and a receipt, a donation to the crew emergency fund in her honor. "You didn't have to," she said. "You already did," I answered. We hugged once, brief and real, and let that be enough. Back at my condo, the afternoon hummed with the honest noises of a building elevator. Cables, a neighbor's radio, low, the dryer's soft thud. Damon brought in a small toolkit and stood at the door waiting for my word. I'd like new door sensors. A camera pointed at the hallway and the mail key in a bowl by the phone, I said. Scheduled, not managed. He smiled without argument and opened the case. We worked from a list we had written together, one item at a time, no heroics. When the screws were tight and the app chirped its satisfied note, I made tea the way Richard liked it. Leaves counted water, shy of a boil cup warmed first. Damon leaned on the counter. "I'm sorry," he said, not for the first time, but in a way that settled. "I wanted to fix it." I shook my head. "You did?" I said. "You listened." Evening lowered itself across the shelves, touching the spines of books that had carried me through other storms. I opened the cabinet and slid today's copies under a new divider I labeled Peace. Behind it sat the order of protection, the court dates, and a duplicate of my thank you note. I locked the cabinet and felt the click in my hand and somewhere under my ribs. We ate simple food soup toast, an apple cut into clean wedges. After dishes, Damon checked the balcony door, then hesitated. "Do you want company tonight?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "On the couch. We'll watch the late forecast and complain about the humidity like sensible people." He laughed, the sound of a boy who had grown into a man and come home. Before night, I stepped onto the balcony. The ocean was a line again, not a threat. In the distance, a ship moved like a quiet promise. I texted Vega a thank you and received a thumbs up and a reminder arraignment recap attached. I filed it in the cloud and on paper. Redundancy is a comfort when you've been told to doubt yourself. I set my phone on the charger, placed my planner beside it, and looked once around the room. That was mine. The chair Richard favored. The quilt I finished last winter. The small pen I carry everywhere. Ink still strong. Peace did not arrive with trumpets. It sat down like an old friend and took off its coat. On the courthouse steps, an advocate from the victim desk offered a brochure and, more useful, a checklist, safety planning address, confidentiality, freezing credit, if someone has your social security number for billing. I checked the boxes that applied and drew a line through what didn't. "You're organized," she said. "Lists help," I said. We set a time for a call next week, not to retell the story, but to practice the statement I may read when the time is right, words arranged for record, not for volume. I wrote one line on the back of her card: "I choose to be remembered accurately." Yes, I wasn't louder, I was clearer, and clarity was enough. I learned that love doesn't mean surrendering your judgment. When care sounds like control, slow down, gather facts, and let paper speak. Boundaries aren't unkind, they're protection. Ask questions, keep records, and lean on professionals. That's how everyday people win in a system built on proof. If this were your family, what would you have done? Have you ever felt managed instead of helped? Tell me below, drop a 1. If this story touched you, share where you're watching from, or tell me why it didn't land for you. If you value stories that defend dignity, please subscribe to the channel for the next chapter.